really exist. Most scientists agree that there could be life on other planets or distant stars. Is it possible to contact these beings from outer space? Well, our guest tonight says yes, and he says he's done it. We'll discuss the phenomena of our times tonight on Milwaukee Reports.
This is Milwaukee Reports. Milwaukee Reports, featuring distinguished guests reporting on subjects of current, local, state, and national interest. Now your moderator for Milwaukee Reports, Robert Herzog.
Good evening. Because this program has been pre-recorded on television tape, we won't be able to incorporate questions from our viewers at home. Our guest tonight is an author, lecturer, and founder of a group known as the Ministry of Universal Wisdom, and it's dedicated to research into the unseen truths. Now, he has an unusual collection of slides and photographs purporting to show visitors from outer space and other phenomena. He is active in the field of aviation, the operator of an airport. Our guest, Mr. Van Tassel, is in Milwaukee to speak at the Milwaukee Eagles Club. Let's welcome now to Milwaukee Reports to discuss this phenomena of our times, Mr. George W. Van Tassel. Good evening, Mr. Van Tassel.
Nice to be here, Bob.
Thank
It's
you.
the first time in Milwaukee.
Thank you. Let's begin our questioning now with our first panelist, Mr. Richard Steinberg.
Mr. Van Tassel, I see that you are the Director of Research on the Integratron, which is a 4-story high electrostatic magnetic generator. And I would like to know just what this is and whether this is either financed or sponsored by the government in any way.
No, Mr. Steinberg, this project originally started out as a little thing we were playing with, and it just grew around us until it finally got to the point where we incorporated. Many of our friends were helping us financially, and the Internal Revenue Service requested that this thing be made legal in order to put the money into the proper place and keep track of it. So we went and incorporated and formed a parent corporation under religious laws and a branch doing scientific research. And this is continuing today.
I see you have some photographs there. Just what is this? What is the purpose of it?
Well, this is a cyclotron backward, in effect. This is a non-metallic structure, 4 stories high. The armatures, which will be on the outer rim of this, are driven by compressed air. And it's a big electrostatic magnetic generator, primarily to work with energy into matter principles instead of matter into energy principles.
Next question, our second panelist, Mr. Burton Polanski.
Yes. I take it that this cyclotron or this Integratron has to do with unidentified flying objects. However, I understand that you are also a director of the Ministry of Universal Wisdom, Inc., which you state is formed for the purpose of research into the unseen truths of life. In addition to the unidentified flying objects, what other psychic phenomena or unseen truths are you involved in?
Well, Mr. Polanski, I think one of the greatest phenomena of our time is the fact that we are in orbit around the sun on the outside of our ship with 5 miles of breathable air, and we can freeze to death at 20,000 feet. And we are literally like fleas on a dog, and we don't recognize any other dogs or any other fleas.
Well, are you involved in ESP, for instance? I'm trying to get the other areas in which your activities take place.
We have done years of research using ourselves as the subjects in ESP.
Next question, our third panelist, Mr. Harry Jankowitz.
Mr. Van Tassel, I'm sure all of us at one time or another have heard about flying saucers or other unidentified flying objects as possibly coming from outer space, if not undoubtedly. Now, isn't it true, or in your opinion, couldn't these UFOs or unidentified flying objects in reality be secret phenomena which some of the major powers on Earth are experimenting with and for defense purposes wish to keep secret?
Well, Mr. Jankowicz, I guess you pronounce it, we've gone into this further than that. The ship witnessed over Chicago in 1896, which was on the front page of the papers for days, and sketches of it. It hovered over the city, was up there. The only thing they could find out wrong with it was its navigation lights didn't conform to our shipping standards. And this ship was setting over Chicago in 1896 before we had a good weather balloon or any kind of a balloon or an Air Force. So the ships that I am referring to go on down through history clear into Sanskrit, through biblical records and many other records. So I'm not referring to spaceships as something made by the Air Force or the government today.
Next question, our fourth panelist, Mr. Peter Bundy.
Mr. Van Tassel, to get a little more specific, you're the author of a publication entitled I Rode on a Flying Saucer, aren't you?
I was not actually the author. We had compiled some records which a publisher reviewed, and he wanted to put these records into print. And this was their idea, to put that title on there to sell the book. It was just a little thing, and it had nothing to do with riding a flying saucer.
Well, didn't you, as a matter of fact, report that you had contacted beings who allegedly were from outer space and talked with them?
That's right.
On several occasions?
That's right.
And in addition to that, you transmitted, allegedly through one of these beings, some greetings from outer space from a saucer station that was supposedly up in the air somewhere, didn't you?
In 1952, I informed the government at their request that they were going to buzz the nation's capital, which they did after I'd informed the Air Force. And I have the return receipt from them, and I know they got the letter. The event occurred. It was headlines all over the United States. I also published data and dated material 5 years prior to the discovery of the Van Allen belt, which they gave me, and this data referred to radiation effects and the fact that this field around the Earth, I call the Earth's force field, was later named the Van Allen belt.
Well, didn't you claim at one point that these beings traveled in saucers on power produced by the transmutation of hard light particles into soft light particles?
That's a reference they made. I don't understand.
Well, by they, you're referring to these people that you spoke to that allegedly landed from this saucer?
This, yes.
What did they look like?
Well, Mr. Bundy, if they walked in here in our clothes and cruised around among us, you wouldn't pay any attention to them. They look like people.
But despite all of this report by you and so forth, the government apparently paid no attention to your sighting and conversation that you told them about.
Well, yes. A year later, a man came out from the Air Technical Intelligence Command and discussed it with me after the buzz had occurred over Washington. I also notified Mr. Eisenhower that they said he was going to be the next president, and when he was a general in Europe. And this also came about.
Well, how many times have you seen these spaceships and the people that ride in them?
The only time I had a contact with a ship was on August the 24th of 1953, 2 o'clock in the morning.
What did this spaceship look like?
Well, if you saw the picture the day the Earth stood still with Michael Rennie playing the part of the spaceman, this was so close to it that it looked to me like it had been copied.
Next question, Mr. Steinberg.
Mr. Van Tassel, you made the statement that you are convinced that UFOs are in truth what they seem to be, visitors from somewhere else in the universe. Now, it seems that there has been very little publicity in the last year or more on unidentified flying objects or flying saucers. And I just wonder what the reason for this is. If these do exist, it would seem to me that there would be a continuation of publicity and people would be citing them, and this isn't something that just would stop automatically at a certain time.
Well, Mr. Steinberg, I agree with Major Donald Kehoe, who has written 4 books on this subject out of the 150-some books written on the subject. that the Air Force is withholding information. Now, of course, we have to realize, too, that the Air Force is a military branch of government. They're not elected by the people, and they're not responsible to the people. So they don't have to answer anything to the public.
Are you accusing the government, then, of censorship in the field of unidentified flying objects, or placing
I'm
restrictions
not
upon the
accusing
press?
them of anything. I go along. I believe the Air Force has more information than anybody else on this subject. That what little is known to civilian groups that have investigated it amounts to nothing compared to what the Air Force has.
Well, do you believe that the government or the Air Force should release this, or do you think it should be kept top secret?
Well, I maintain they should release it, and they should have done it a long time ago.
Didn't the Air Force release an official release saying there was nothing to their investigation?
No, Bob, they've made the statement several times in the press that these objects present no danger to the security of the United States. Now, in this one sentence alone is an admission there are objects and an admission they are friendly. And they're not referring to their objects. They're referring to what we commonly refer to as flying saucers or spaceships. This is what they call UFOs, unidentified flying objects.
Mr. Van Tassel, are you aware that General Thomas D. White in 1960, the then Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, made this statement, and I quote, "So far, not a single bit of material evidence of the existence of spaceships has been found," end quote.
I've seen material evidence myself, so I'm not concerned with...
You wouldn't agree with General White's statement?
No.
Have you read a book called The World of Flying Saucers, authored by a Donald H. Menzel?
I haven't read the book, no.
Dr. Menzel is an astronomer, astrophysicist, and director of the Harvard College Observatory. And in this book, he makes the statement that no astronomical observatory in this country has ever photographed any extraplanetary spaceships of the kind you're telling us about.
Well, this is quite possible. By the way, Mr. Menzel was disproved by the Air Force themselves. They stated that his philosophy and theory in regard to these things didn't stand up.
Well, he's published articles in the National Geographic, Scientific American, Look, and Life about the subject, as well as writing this book. What qualifications do you have to balance with Dr. Menzel, who, as I said, is an astronomer, an astrophysicist, and director of the Harvard Observatory?
I have friends who are astronomers, and they maintain that you couldn't photograph. If you had a telescope focused on the moon, birds could fly across in front of it, or any object between here and the moon could pass through between it, and because it's not in focus, it wouldn't show. So unless they are focused on something, they're not going to see it anyway.
Well, what proof do you have of your story that you've contacted these people? Do you have pictures of them? Do you have any objects they've given you from outer space?
No, I haven't any objects.
Did anyone else see these people in the spaceship you told us about?
If anything that they could present to us, we could duplicate. There would be no purpose in presenting artifacts as such, because anything I could hand you as an artifact that they gave me, you'd say immediately, well, we can make this, and we could. So this wouldn't be proof in itself.
So you have no proof as in the line that we think of it legally, such as other witnesses who've seen the same craft that you have in the same space people?
Well, I have evidence. Evidence is what we observe in a court or witnesses' reports. We have millions of people that have cited these things all over the world. There are publications printed on this matter all over the world. The Brazilian Navy officially admitted it in the Brazilian press when they took pictures from the IGY ship that was furnished by the Brazilian Navy. I've been introduced by the commander of a naval flight training station in a lecture, and he told the audience that he personally had twice chased these objects and his radar locked on them, and he said he didn't know what they were, but he said radar doesn't lock on hallucination.